we have our legal expert of the week in our studio, Yogesh Singh, partner Trilegal, is on the show with us. Yogesh, thank you so much for joining in today. In recent months, major real estate companies have come into the spotlight for their alleged unfair trade practices. Now, not many home seekers are aware that there are legislations that protect you as a consumer if you have been cheated by your builder. Every state has its own Apartment Ownership Act that governs apartment purchase and ownership in the state. So we're going to chat with Yogesh today and try and understand how these acts work. We'll be looking at the Apartment Acts of Haryana and Uttar Pradesh in particular. Yogesh, first, just break down what is an Apartment Ownership Act, what is the extent of security that it provides to a consumer?
So an Apartment Act deals with, is an act under the concurrent list of the Constitution of India, and it deals with the rules and regulations governing how sale of apartments should take place, how builders should conduct themselves, and what are the rights that are available to the residents or the purchasers of the property of apartments.
Okay, so coming to the specifics, now looking at the Haryana Apartment Ownership Act, when it defines common areas and facilities, there's some kind of an ambiguity. They add the word limited or parking areas of common use. In the Uttar Pradesh, there's a sense of a dichotomy. It defines common areas and then it defines independent areas. So do you feel these are some kind of gaps in the Apartment Ownership Acts which allows developers to sell parking, retain commercial spaces? What do you have to say?
Yes, I think there is a lot of inconsistency among the Apartment Acts, and generally I feel that the UP Apartment Act is a more progressive sort of regulation dealing with various aspects which the other regulations really don't deal with, and I think that's primarily just a reflection that the UP Apartment Act happens to be the most recent one and therefore has captured a few thought processes which are important, but at the same time it is short. In fact, since you're mentioning that, I would say that even the proposed legislation at the central level, the real estate bill, is again progressive and it's much better than the UP Apartment Act, but I think it still falls short on certain grounds, but it does provide protection on various others.
Also, if you could briefly list out the various duties and liabilities that a builder has under the Apartment Ownership Act in terms of documents and mandatory procedures.
So broadly, the UP Act requires that the builder should maintain copies, and it provides right to the apartment owners to actually write to the builder and provide all copies, and in the event of a breach they can approach the UP authorities and require them to apply sanctions on them. Other than that, the UP Act, one major benefit that it provides is that the apartment owners actually have a right to be heard in the process of any further changes being made to the building plan. It requires the whole process of any further changes being made to the building plan being subject to the approval of the apartment owners themselves, which is a good locus, because I think a fundamental prohibition on the builders making a change and purchasing additional FAR is not a very commercial approach. There may be a better so there may be more FAR which is available and the builder wants to further develop it, but to put the onus on the builder to get the consent of the apartment owners, potentially offer them additional avenues in terms of moving up or down on the floors so that their preferences are protected, is I think a good means.
So while these acts have some strong measures, the issue is of compliance. Is there any punitive action that is mentioned in these acts that can be taken against developers?
Absolutely. So in fact, the punitive sanction on the developers includes imprisonment and fines, and the punitive sanctions. So there can be punitive sanctions even on the apartment owners if they are in breach, but they are limited to fines. Now the difference is that, as you rightly mentioned, that the enforcement itself is so weak that people don't see that as a major issue which has to be factored in their scheme of things. They think of these as irregularities which are procedural and can be dealt with. I think some recent cases have provided examples that it may not be easy to deal with those sort of situations, and you need to comply with the terms in a more stringent manner. The real estate bill that is in the horizon, and I think we should keep that in mind, actually links the penalties to the amount of or the value of the project and the development itself, which I think is a good way to measure it, because then the developers would also be under severe pressure to actually apply and follow the rules much more heavily, because the punitive sanctions on them could actually be astronomically high, especially in the case of large projects.
Also, while talking about the loopholes, we spoke about the ambiguity regarding common areas. These apartment acts are also silent on the word super area. We all know that in the market today, everybody sells on super built up area, but silent on that. So, do you think we need an upgrade on these apartment acts?
I certainly, as in, I think an upgrade on the apartment acts is far due. The Haryana Apartment Act, already the government is considering provisions for a model buyer agreement that is going to be provided for. Similarly, the real estate bill that is hopefully with the new government, it might come into, it might be effected fairly soon. That also has a provision for a model buyer agreement, and within those certain parameters dealing with what should be qualifying as super built up, what should be the overall loading on the flats, are provisions which will be dealt with.
So, Yogesh, do you feel that an Apartment Ownership Act is the ultimate Bible for a home buyer? This is that document that every buyer should refer to when he's signing the builder-buyer agreement?
Absolutely, I think that is a must, and hopefully with some further legislative changes, we will also have a model buyer agreement which should address a lot of grievances. Today we make a booking and we don't see a contract, and when the contract is being implemented, if there are changes, then actually it is natural for the builder to expect to and make certain changes, because things constantly move, and if additional FARs are available, they tend to increase sometimes the FARs, or change certain locations, or change certain structures. But the moment there is a deviation from what has already been contracted for, that should require consent of the both parties, and which is what hopefully the new regime will provide. So I do think that you looking at the UP Apartment Act or the other apartment acts is important, but at the same time today they do not have enough substance in them, and hopefully with some more legislative changes, I think all of us will be looking at these apartment acts much more closely in hopefully in the near future.
Okay, I know you can speak about Uttar Pradesh and Haryana, the acts for these states, but what about the rest of the country? How strong are the apartment acts there? Are they very similar in their wording?
Yes, absolutely very similar, and unfortunately do not deal with or provide adequate protection to the purchasers as such, and which is why the need, and everybody is really anxiously waiting for the real estate regulator to be set up, and also for the new act at the central level legislation to be passed. Because one issue that we have progressed beyond is, so right now we are not even talking about doing a diligence on a property, right? Till few years back we actually did not even do a diligence. Today we have become conscious enough that we do some basic level of diligence, even if the moment we are not buying from one of the very heavy hitting builders. And now even after doing the diligence, if somebody has not followed the process and not provided certain consents, and even sanctions have been obtained without following the due process of law which is provided for under the regime, that could give me additional recourse. So therefore looking at these acts is very important, but also some more reinforcement is needed to actually make them substantial and provide some real remedy to the apartment buyers.
Okay, so every state has an Apartment Ownership Act which dictates how a builder and a buyer have to conduct themselves in a transaction when it comes to property buying. Many of these acts have strong teeth to govern transparency in the sector, but yet a lot needs to be done to make them tighter. All right, Yogesh, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you.
Pleasure speaking to you.